Hello, and thank you all for joining us today for EarthSafe Canada's virtual speaker series. My name is Carrie, and I'm with EarthSafe Canada. Today, we are really excited to be joined by Hope Bohanec, who is in Eugene, Oregon. Thank you, Hope, for making the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
So I'm going to give a brief introduction, and then we'll turn it over to Hope. Hope Bohanec has been involved with animal protection and environmental activism for over 30 years. She's the executive director of Compassionate Living and the host of the Hope for the Animals podcast. Hope co-founded the Humane Hoax project, the Himsa Living project, and has organized hundreds of online and in-person events, including the Humane Hoax online conference, the Humane Hoax chicken webinar, and the Sonoma County Veg Fest. Hope has also published 2 books on the subject of humane washing and greenwashing. The first, The Ultimate Betrayal, Is There Happy Meat? And the second, The Humane Hoax, Essays Exposing the Myth of Happy Meat, Humane Dairy, and Ethical Eggs. Over the last 3 decades, she has worked for the national nonprofits, United Poultry Concerns, and In Defense of Animals, as well as contributed to chapters in 2 anthologies. Today, Hope is going to talk about the trend in humane washing and greenwashing in animal product marketing. Labels like cage-free eggs, family farm dairy, and grass-fed meat are everywhere, but what do the labels really mean? Is free range better for the environment? Is organic more humane? She'll be addressing all those items. So just before I go over to Hope, our plan for this session is that Hope will be speaking for about 45 minutes, and then we will open the session up for 15 minutes for your questions and any comments that you have. If you're watching live and you post a question or comment on Facebook or YouTube, you will be entered to win a $25 gift card from Vegan Supply. So please put your comments and questions to us. And now I'm excited to turn it over to Hope.
All right. Thank you very much, Carrie. And thanks to Canada EarthSafe for having me. I appreciate it. It was a wonderful introduction. All right. I am going to share my screen and get my PowerPoint going here. Let me see if I can figure out what I'm not sure how to turn change it to the next one, because let's see, I had the little things down here, but now it's under my dock. How do I go to the next screen? Okay, let me see here. Sorry, just trying to figure out how to change them, because when we tested it, it was down here, but now it's not. And I'm not sure if my arrows don't work.
Yeah, your arrows don't work?
No. It's so funny because there was the 2 little things last time. Let me hit escape. Well, escape's not working either. Sorry, everybody. Hang on a sec. Let me just figure this out. I'm going to stop sharing and try again. Jonathan, any ideas? Yeah, no, we're getting the same
thing. Is there a
thing.
way for you to change the focus of which program you're using so you can stop the slideshow and then restart it?
The focus, I'm not sure.
Like Command Tab? Is that a thing? The Mac key and then Tab?
I don't know. What are you suggesting?
Okay. What happens if you click on the PowerPoint at the bottom of the screen
there it is. There it is. Oh, whew. Okay, everybody. Technical craziness surpassed. Okay, here we go. All right, sorry about that. Looks like I have access to that now. All right, so just a little about me quickly. I have been vegan for 34 years and have worked for national nonprofits like Carrie mentioned. And I've been doing this animal advocacy work for about 3 decades. And I've been researching this issue that I now call the humane hoax. Others call it humane washing or greenwashing, the humane myth. Has been said for about 20 years now. And just as an overview, like, what is it? What are we talking about? What is the humane hoax? So the perception that there is this wide range of better ways to farm animals to produce their products, animal products. It's the new label of animal products that conveys a false sense that there is some improvement in the industry, either ethically or environmentally. And I would add in there with humane washing and greenwashing also the backyard, like kind of do-it-yourself animal products, eggs from chickens that you keep, or actually slaughtering animals as people are doing now by, in this DIY kind of ethos. That also, I think, falls under the Humane Hoax purview. And we have chapters in the book about that as well. So just to kind of mention that. So I have written 2 books on the subject. I actually wrote the very first book on the subject of humane washing, The Ultimate Betrayal Is There Happy Meat? That one is now about 11 years old. And, there's just been so much more momentum and this seeing these products and these labels just grow, as well as the advocacy knowledge around it and people speaking out about it more and more. So I decided for the second kind of volume, the second book, to do an anthology, and that's the Humane Hoax anthology. And there's 18 contributing authors, amazing authors, a collection of voices that are academics and animal rescuers and sanctuary workers, all speaking on the subject from different angles. And we'll talk a little about it. And the book's broken down into 4 sections. This new book, The Humane Hoax, is broken down into 4 parts. And the first part is called Humane Washing. And so this kind of is the overview and the bigger picture and the ethical issue, the animals themselves. And one of the things that kind of, how can you boil this down and talk about it in simple terms or with a short paragraph? And this is kind of one of the things that I like to say is that there are inherent cruelties in all animal farming that can't be avoided with any humane label and make a product profitable. If you want to make a product profitable, you're going to experience some issues where the animal is going to suffer, and it's not diminished by these feel-good labels. So that's kind of a one way to nutshell it, but there's so much to it, and it is difficult to break down. So just so you get an idea, but there's so much more to it. So, again, just to produce a profitable product, the well-being of the animals are going to be compromised in, fundamental ways, no matter how humane the operation even wants to be, right? There's these inherent cruelties. There's universal practices to make a product profitable. Body mutilations, separation of families, slaughter at a very young age. And we'll get into details about that. But one thing that I want to talk about that's interesting, since I've been doing this project for a while, and I have the Humane Hoax Project, which is part of my nonprofit, Compassionate Living, there's pushback, of course, as we know, in the vegan community, we get pushback. And some of the pushback that I've gotten around this project and around this issue, the Humane Hoax, is that people will say, and even vegans, this isn't just outside of veganism, but even vegans will say, well, why are you focusing on just a few small farms with a small number of animals that are trying to do it better, right? This is a common critique. And that's why I want to address it right away. So there's lots going on here and lots to unpack with this concern, but I'll try to break it down into 2 parts. And one is that there are there's companies out there, hundreds of companies out there that are the big guys. Big Ag uses the Humane Hoax just as much as the small farms, okay? A great example is Butterball turkey. I have this image of Butterball turkey on the screen here. Butterball turkey actually produces, it's one of the largest producers. It is actually the #1 largest producer of turkey meat in the US. So we're talking about, hundreds of thousands of animals, sometimes in one barn, right? Large numbers of animals in these intensive confinement situations. And if you look on that package, you'll see a little red barn with a yellow circle around it, right? That is the American Certified Humane label. And all Butterball turkey products have that American Humane Certified label. So we're not talking about just small farms and a small number of animals, right? Huge industrial agriculture uses this as well. And I get into this more in the intro of my book, as well as my chapter in the book. And I do talk specifically about butterball turkey. I don't have the time to really go into all the details of why American Certified Humane is not better for the turkeys, but I go into it in the book. Another example is Fairlife Dairy. Fairlife Dairy, you see the picture here. This is a dairy that was a more recent dairy. They're not very old. I think they just started in the 2000s. And they kind of emerged with this name Fairlife Dairy, right, to say that they're doing it better, that they're giving the animals a fair life, right? But there was an undercover investigation of a Fairlife Dairy farm. And of course, there's multiple farms when we're talking about these products. It's not just one farm, multiple farms. There was a 2019 undercover investigation of one of these farms where the calves were not only experiencing those inherent cruelties that I was talking about, where they separate the babies from the mothers, where the babies are sick, injured, sitting on dead piles. You can see this poor calf is obviously suffering. But also, they were forcefully dragging and throwing and kicking and punching animals, the mama cows and the babies. It was brutal, brutal footage to watch, this undercover investigation. And this is a supposedly, all moving towards this better life for animals, a fair life for animals. So the big ones, the big ag uses these marketing tools as well. And just to wrap this up, it's predicted that cage-free eggs are going to be 71% of the market by 2026. So we're not talking about small farms and a small number of animals with these labels. So just to kind of give you the picture of that. The other thing that's going on here, and I snapped this picture at a natural food store in Sebastopol, California, in Sonoma County, at their meat counter. And this was like that, facepalm moment, because it's like, if you think about it, veal is really kind of the one place where we kind of had a win in the last 30 years, right? Even if people still eat meat, even if people don't want to go vegan or whatever, they'll often say, oh, well, but I would never eat veal. I won't eat veal. Veal's a baby. I would never eat veal, right? But hey, now we can even eat babies because they're being humanely raised, right? Just awful. So there is something called the psychological refuge effect. Okay, and this is where the humane hoax issue is a systematic problem and a psychological one, where people are thinking that there is this movement towards a better future for animals, that we're moving towards better conditions, right? And so they see these labels and they think everything's getting better, that food is being more ethically produced, right? And unfortunately, that is not the case. And if anything, everything is getting worse because these farms are just getting bigger, they're getting more industrial. So it's absolutely going the opposite direction of what people are thinking because of all these labels. So there's a certain psychological issue going on as well that is very detrimental, and I think very concerning, because it gives people that feeling that everything's better, that they can buy these products and everything's going to be okay for the animals. And that is absolutely not the case. So going on, this is a quote from the book, redefining terms to imply that humane treatment of animals is possible within the framework of animal agriculture, known as humane washing, has been instrumental in providing the discourse necessary for the continued exploitation and abuse of animals. And that's exactly what's happening. There's been pushback for the last 20, 30 years. Animal advocates have been saying, hey, things are going wrong. This is not okay for the animals. And this is how the industry is going to appease consumers and make it possible for us to have animal products into the future, right? Devanatha Nair was the author of this chapter in the Humane Hoax. She's a wonderful writer, a great chapter. She writes for Sentient Media, if you're familiar with them. Okay, so I did a bit of investigating myself when I lived in Sonoma County, California for 30 years, and I decided to go out and see for myself what cage-free was like. What is organic dairy like? I want to see. So I went out and had a look around, and guess what? Chickens are easy to hide. Chickens are very easy to hide. You don't know where there's a chicken operation. You just don't know. The clue, what will clue you into it is if you see signs like this: keep out, biohazard. Okay, that is what would clue me into knowing that, oh, there might be a chicken operation here. Okay, so then getting a little closer, you're walking up. Again, you see that keep out sign, right? But this is typically what you would see. Rows and rows of these windowless barns, warehouses, whatever you want to call them. Get up a little closer and look in, and oh, did we miss that? Our next picture is not the one I wanted it to be. Oh well. Cage-free operations. I think I might have it somewhere. Oh, I don't know. No, I missed it. I took the picture out. Anyway, hopefully I think I have another picture that's like it down the line. But if you can imagine, sorry, I took the picture out, but there's, a warehouse full of chickens that are just all over the floor. Floor systems that are just thousands of birds crammed in together, never seeing the light of day, never getting to set foot outside. Free range situations, all of these labels are completely unregulated. It's the farmer's word. Nobody goes out really to investigate the farm. The only exception really is organic with that. But with cage-free, free range, all of these, it's the farmer's word. And even with a free range farm, you could have, and I saw this where you could have a little outdoor space, maybe 5 by 5 foot, tiny little space that's just a mud puddle in the winter, and that it's so unappealing, no bird even wants to go out there, but that's what they can consider free range. And they can have that door open for 5 minutes a day and no bird even, it's like nobody wants to go out there. That's how someone can get away with having free range on a label. So, and I saw such a wide variety when I was out looking at these things, and even some of the cage-free the caged operations, the battery cage operations that I saw had, I thought, more welfare, the better standards for the birds. Like the birds looked better than the cage-free birds. The cage-free birds were looking sick or featherless, or they mean so little, unfortunately. And then the birds are still coming from the heartless hatcheries. This is where the male birds are separated out. You can see the sexting separation here, where the female birds are going in one chute, males in the other. The males are a waste product, as we know from the egg industry, because they are not profitable to be raised for meat, because they're an egg-laying strand of chicken. So they are killed by the thousands. The little males are thrown in the dumpsters. These are chicks being shoveled into the dumpsters. They're suffocating on their brothers, under the weight of their brothers, dying of dehydration, exposure. This is all with the cage-free labels, with the free range labels. They all come from the same hatcheries. Some of them are ground up alive. These are chicks that are thrown into the maceration machines that are ground up alive for fertilizer and other products. It's absolutely brutal. And these are newborn baby chicks that we see on Easter cards, and that are a symbol of innocence and love in our society. And what are we doing to these, millions of baby birds? And these labels don't change this. Okay, moving on to dairy. And then there's brutal slaughter. And I took those pictures out eventually of my presentation because it's too much for even me to see. But of course, they're all going to a brutal slaughter at a young age. So alternative dairy products, now we're talking about labels like organic and certified humane, things like that. Artificial insemination, I'm not going to get into that much. I don't have a lot of time. We do get into details in the book about it, but I'll just say that artificial insemination of dairy cows is absolutely common. That's how they are bred mostly. It's very rare that there's actually a bull involved. And artificial insemination really is, I call it a cow's Me Too moment. It is a sexual violation, really awful. And if you're curious and can stomach it, you can check on, you can Google YouTube video of artificial insemination. It's just awful. Babies are taken away at birth. We're going to talk about these things that I have on the screen here moving forward. So over here on the left, that's what we want to believe, right? That we want to believe that on these small farms, when they have a good label, that the babies get to stay with the mom and they're out on the field. No, of course not. That is not the reality. The reality is on the right. These babies are taken away from birth very soon after, and are taken and confined in these calf hutches. Now, people see these. I'll talk more about them in a minute, actually, with another photo that I have of that. So I investigated dairy farms as well. And guess what? Cows are much harder to hide than chickens. Cows are hard to hide. And cows, they have to move them around the farm. They move them to the dairy parlor and to other places. So you see the cows. So it's completely different with a cow farm. The signs are actually very inviting. The signs are like, oh, look, everything's great here. We're environmentally certified and we're organic, right? And so you see these signs in up and down West County in near Sebastopol and Petaluma, all of these wonderful signs for these small dairy farms, right? But then again, if you go a little closer and are brave like I used to be and go on to these farms, this is what you typically see. Now, this is what I was talking about, these calf hutches. And people often think that these are veal calf hutches. They are not. These are actually for the baby females. They'll be taken from one area of the dairy and put into these calf hutches where they are confined. And I think the next one, yeah. So this is typically they're kept, behind bars, unable to be with their mother, unable to frolic and roam. And this was actually when I went on a tour of one of these dairy facilities. I was on a tour, and so they had this one calf all cleaned up and nice, for it to show us. But again, her mother was nowhere to be found. She's behind these bars. She's got that awful commodification tag with the number in her ear. So, is this an ideal situation for a baby calf? No, she's frightened. She's sad. She's alone. And this is, again, these small organic dairies. Now, when I would go onto the dairy farm without a tour and I would just walk right up, this is what I would typically see: muck and manure and dirt and gross. And, on the right, that was a little baby calf curled up. You can kind of see behind or beside that concrete trough. And I assumed that was a baby male because he had been taken from the others. He wasn't taken to the calf hutches, and he's probably awaiting a truck to be taken to veal or beef slaughter. You also saw injured animals. I saw injured animals. This mama cow, her back left leg was swollen 3 times her other legs, her other feet, and she was limping around. So I saw injured animals. And, time-wise, I wish so much I could tell more stories. I have them in my book, but there's also a whole, oh, well, I just changed the channel and didn't mean to. There we go. There's also a whole thing around organic dairy and how it can be even worse for the cows. We think about these things as these labels as, well, at least it's a little better. And I hear it even from vegans all the time, where they'll say, oh, well, at least it's a little better. That's not necessarily true. In some instances, it can be even worse, and that is very common in organic dairy. I don't have time to get into the whole story of it. You can get it from the book, but just to know that, it doesn't necessarily, and I went into writing these books and getting all this information thinking, like 15 years ago, when I first started writing my first book, The Ultimate Betrayal, I thought that I was going to be saying things like, well, free range is better, but going vegan's best. Or organic's better, but going vegan's best. I mean, that's how I thought I was going to be framing it all. No, I did not find that. I actually found that it was either neutral or sometimes it could be worse. So it was farm to farm to farm. Anyway, let's move on. So I want to talk about this romanticizing out to pasture, right? There's this feeling that, well, if we can just get the animals out of the confinement barn and out onto pasture, then it'll be fine. They'll be happy. Everything will be great, right? Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. And these are domesticated animals. These are not wild animals. These are domesticated animals. They need our care and attention. They can't just be thrown out onto pasture and think that everything's going to be fine. There's a myriad of problems that free-range animals face, and it's certainly worse for the environment as well, when you take into account animal use, or I'm sorry, land use, deforestation. But there was this fantastic meta-analysis that was done that was called the Animal Welfare and Production Challenges Associated with Pastured Pig Systems. And they analyzed numerous studies from 2000 to 2020. It came out in 2020 or 2021. And they analyzed all of these different farms that were doing pork production, either free range or family farmed or whatever, had all these labels, right? And they found that pigs were exposed to extreme temperatures, had heat stress, weren't able to get adequate shade. The lighter colored skinned pigs that are typical, the pink pigs, had really bad problems. They would get sunburn, blistering. They were also in the winter exposed to extreme cold, frostbite, piglets getting hypothermia and pneumonia. They're more vulnerable to predators, more vulnerable to pathogens and parasites. I mean, so many problems. So this, just getting animals into free range situations opens up a whole host of new problems, right? The very first chapter of the book it's called A Pig Called Silver. And it's a woman who actually was raised on a small scale pig farm. Her father had a pork production farm that was just a small scale pork farm, and she was raised on it. And she goes into all these wonderful, heart-wrenching and heartwarming stories about her interactions with the pigs, but she also breaks down this study really, really well, and cites it well. So anyway, great. The very first chapter is about this very thing. Okay, so we're going to move into part 2 of the book, which is greenwashing. And I know I talked a lot. I hope that we have time to get everything in, but I'm going to move through this fairly quickly. So, okay, so now when we're in greenwashing, we're talking about issues like, or labels like sustainable and local and organic, right? This is the environmental part of this, the environmental impact that is again being greenwashed, that, you can see labels like this, and I love that on this organic milk carton. I took a picture of this because look, they've got her name, Buttercup. This is the name of the cow, right? Who is long dead when you pick up your milk. I mean, it's just, so awful. So very ridiculous. Anyway, moving on. So animal products are much more energy intensive than plant products. Just getting an animal product to market causes so much more energy waste, resource intensiveness. There's the refrigeration and the transportation and all that you see here, the slaughter process, the dairy, the milking process. All these things have energy intensive, right? You've got to use fossil fuels and energy. Comparing that to plant foods, it's really much more intensive. And this is a great example that goes really for almost all those labels that we're talking about, like local and all these labels. But this just really breaks it down. And this one is organic. Okay, now we're talking about organic farming. So we've got 3 different diets here. We've got veganism, vegetarian in the middle, and a diet that includes meat, dairy, and egg. The SAD diet, the standard American diet, is there at the bottom. How far those green lines go across, that's the greenhouse gas impact, right? And we've got organic farming is the light green line, and conventional farming is the dark green line. So now let's look at that very last line at the bottom, the dark green line. That's where most everyone is. Non-organic standard American diet, right? So the worst of the worst, the most impactful. Now, let's say someone says, I really want to be more ecological. I think I want to really improve my diet. I'm going to go all organic. I'm going to buy organic meat and organic dairy. I'm going to do everything organic. Okay, well, you make some impact. You move to the next light green line that's right above it, and you've reduced your impact by 8%. All right, well, that's something. But let's say that same person says, I really want to make a difference. I want to eat better. I want to eat more ecologically. I'm going to go vegan. And now we're not talking about organic anymore, just going vegan, right? Non-vegan, non-organic vegan. All right, now we're talking. Now we move up to that dark green line at the top under veganism, and you've reduced your impact by 87%. Wow, that's some impact, right? You can take it all the way and go organic, vegan, and then you're up at that tiny little light green line. You've reduced your impact by 94%. But my point here is that, when we think about these labels like local or sustainable or grass-fed or any of these labels, you're reducing your impact maybe a little bit, not always, but maybe a little bit. But really going vegan, that's where you get the impact. Plant foods always, no matter what, have a less overall impact, right? Okay. Now, grass-fed, I want to talk about grass-fed here because this is one of those that does not fall into that little bit better. Remember how we were talking about organic and the dairy cows and their experience and the ethical issues, how organic's not necessarily better? Well, grass-fed is not necessarily better for the environment. There are all these studies coming out now, studies from Harvard and what was the other one? Numerous studies, Harvard, Oxford, Washington State University, right? We're finding that grass-fed meat can actually produce 50 to 60% more greenhouse gas emissions than conventional beef. What? Isn't that why people are buying this? Because it's better? Wow, we're finding out that it's not. There can also be more water wasted in conventional. I don't have the time to really break down the why of it, but my book in the greenwashing section of my book, at the end of my book, there is just almost, I think it's like 50 pages of endnotes. It's a thick pages and pages of endnotes. And those endnotes are mainly geared towards the greenwashing section, where there is a great deal. These authors did such a good job of breaking down the studies and the stats on greenwashing. And this is where we really break down grass-fed as well. Regenerative grazing is yet another one that, again, I don't really have the time to get into the details of, but I made this meme. Regenerative grazing is the equivalent of clean coal. Live green, live vegan. So if you want to get more details on this, I'll give a plug for my podcast, Hope for the Animals podcast. I really get into some wonderful detail with some incredible people. Nicholas Carter wrote one of the chapters in the greenwashing section of my book, and he breaks down regenerative grazing and why it is not the green superstar that the environmental community wants it to be. And Tushar Mehta is another one who did a wonderful job of breaking down regenerative grazing as well in this episode called The Climate Crisis. And there's others as well. If you go to my website, Humane Hoax, or not Humane Hoax, that's a whole nother project, my Hope for the Animals podcast, my podcast project, there's a drop-down menu for categories, and you can go to environmental, and it'll bring up all the environmental focused podcasts. Okay, let's move on. So the third section of the book is called Language and Labels. And this is when we're getting into that psychological aspect that I was talking about earlier, that, that thing where we really want to believe it's true. We want to believe we're moving in the right direction. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about this is that people they don't want to hurt animals. They don't. I mean, we have that on our side. And it's interesting to note that there was a survey by the Sentience Institute. They did a survey of consumers of animal products, and they found people said in this survey that 58% felt that farmed animals were treated well, right? They thought that the labels that they were buying, the food they were buying, that animals in these from these animal products were treated humanely, were treated well, sorry. And then 75% believed that the products that they were purchasing came from animals, quote, animals that were treated humanely. 75% of people thought that. And my concern is that the presence of these alternative humane labels in the market is really exacerbating this psychological refuge effect, right? It's appeasing consumers into that false sense that there's this industry-wide movement towards better conditions. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of these labels. This is a new one that, actually, we'll get to that one. Let's start with this one. So this one, this grass-fed meat or grass-fed dairy milk, grass-fed milk label on this milk. So milk chocolate, right? Grass-fed milk chocolate. I snapped this picture at a store and I was like, what do they want me to believe here, right? What do they want me to believe? Do they want me to believe that this product is more environmental? They've got the sustainably grazed, so it's more environmental. Do they want me to believe that it's, the cows are better off, that it's better for the cows? Do they want me to believe it's healthier? All of these things, right? All of these things. They are hoping that you're thinking all of that when you're looking at these labels. But what's on here? Grass-fed. Okay, that's 2 words. And what does that really mean? It means that the cows ate grass for some portion of their lives. That's all it means. That's it. And so much is implied. So much is implied that, we think that it's better for the cows, better for our health, better for the environment. But that's not really what's being said here, right? It's all implied. It's what they hope you think. It's really, really deceiving. And it reminds me of just how much we can, how much can be weaved and assumed into 2 words, right? Okay, here's another one that's a new one. Responsibly raised and unconditionally loved. This is another facepalm one, right? Woo. So responsibly raised, what does this mean? Again, it's sufficiently vague that it could mean anything. It could be environmental, it could be ethical, whatever you want it to mean, right? And this one is being used by Chipotle's, Whole Foods. You see this one at Whole Foods. And then this unconditionally love. This was a Chipotle's ad, by the way. And this unconditionally loved is really, it's so nefarious and awful. So what are we talking about here? There's a burrito, right? What's being pictured here? A burrito. So we don't mean that the burrito was unconditionally loved, right? Of course, what we're talking about, or what they're talking about, is the flesh that is cut up in this burrito. So we're supposed to believe that an animal that was killed and cut up was unconditionally loved? Really? This is what? What's going on here? This is cognitive dissonance, on overdrive, and really, really disturbing. And so there's a really wonderful chapter in the book by John Sanbanmatsu, and it's called Murder, She Wrote. And it's about the femivores, this kind of interesting genre of literature where women eschew their corporate jobs and their whatever corporate and urban lives, buy some land, go out onto the farm, raise animals, and they're not just raising plants, they're raising animals and killing these animals themselves, right? In some form of like reclaiming their power. but it's very bizarre. Anyway, it's a great chapter, very interesting chapter on this exact thing where they have a lot of mothering language where they're mothering the animals and caring for the animals. They're very concerned for the animals until the day they have to kill them, and it's this really weird stuff that we're facing with all this DIY slaughter and raising your own animals. That's kind of where we're getting into that area where I just don't have time to dig into that in one talk. But interesting, fascinating stuff. And it kind of lends into the final part of my book, which is spiritual dimensions. It's the fourth part of the book. There's just a few chapters on the spiritual dimensions. My husband has a chapter in this book, and my husband is a Dharma teacher. He teaches Sanskrit and comparative Dharma studies, and he has a chapter on spiritual bypass in DIY slaughter, where in these DIY slaughter classes, people will use very flowery and spiritual language to talk about what they're doing. And spiritual bypass is using, it's for anything, not necessarily just around animal issues, but using spirituality to kind of justify doing very bad things. Right. So that is a really interesting chapter on spiritual bypass in the DIY slaughter industry. But, just really fascinating chapters in this book. But I know time is ticking. So, I guess I should explain what this chapter or what this picture is. This picture is actually a slaughterhouse in Petaluma, a small scale slaughterhouse that I lived in Pengrove, California, which you have to drive into Petaluma to do your shopping. And so driving into Petaluma, I would see this on the side of the road every day. One day in late 2000 teens, they had completely whitewashed. It used to be like a brown color or something, and they whitewashed the building and they put Mindful Meats on the side of this slaughterhouse. And I had to pull over and just, cry because I couldn't believe that, that they could really think that anything mindful. And this is where we get appropriation of spiritual terms and of Buddhist and Hindu traditions, using these terms in very awful ways. But to think that anything mindful could be happening in a slaughterhouse, it's mind-blowing. And I actually have a portion of my chapter where I talk about this and this slaughterhouse and this moment in my life in my chapter. So that's the picture of the slaughterhouse that I refer to in my chapter. And that's the spiritual dimensions aspect. So, okay. So, to wrap it up, the only humane choice is vegan. Even as I speak out against this, and I don't know how much more time I have, I do want to give a couple plugs for a few things at the end, but I'm trying to wrap up. I'll just be quick here, but, even as I speak out against the humane hoax, I do see it as a positive progression. I think it's a place we kind of have to go through, right? People, the only reason that these labels exist is because people care. Because people care about animals. They don't want to hurt animals if they can help it. And these labels give them a way, an out, to think that they're not hurting animals, right? So, I think that it's a positive progression. I think that we do have to come to a place, though, a logical conclusion, right, is that we cannot commodify and kill animals at all in any way and with any labels. I believe we will get there and people will get there eventually, but we also can't be complacent, right, and think that people are going to get there on their own because the marketing and the labels are lying to them. So we have to counter that. We have to be a voice of truth and counter these labels, counter these narratives, and tell the animal stories. And that anytime an animal is commodified, that an animal is exploited, an animal is abused, anytime there's commodification, there is abuse and suffering, right? No matter the label. So I just feel this is a really critical issue to focus on. So I ask you to please be an ambassador for the book. Buy a copy for your local library, buy a copy for a friend. You can go directly to the what is it? The publishers, Lantern Publishing and Media. They're an amazing publishing house that publish only vegan books. So please support them. Go directly to Lantern. Write a review on Amazon. That helps so much. I had a burst of them at the beginning, and now very few are coming in. So a review on Amazon helps a lot. I think you do have to have an Amazon account. You don't have to bought the book on Amazon, but you do have to have an Amazon account. And share the book, share about it on social media, just, any way that you can get the word out. I'd also like to, again, give a plug for my podcast, Hope for the Animals podcast. Please check it out. National Animal Rights Day was just at the beginning of June. I had their founder on recently, Elam Orion, and there's some great environmental thing. I cover a lot in the interviews, and I also have solo presentations, just monologues that are things that I'm thinking deeply about and want to share. And my organization is Compassionate Living. Compassionate-living.org is the website. That's where my projects are under. My podcast is under the Compassionate Living nonprofit as well, and the Humane Hoax Project. And that's where all of this information and my books and our webinars, and we have a Humane Hoax team. We have a volunteer team. If you're interested in being on the team, we meet monthly, and we talk deeply about these issues, and we figure out how to get the word out there. So please join us if you'd like, and also go to our website, humanehoax.org. There's some great articles there. You can share those articles, help us to get the word out there, spread far and wide. And I will wrap up with this quote from the book: "We must not let the deception of new marketing eclipse the fundamental cruelty of animal agriculture." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hope. There's a lot of great information there. It's actually quite interesting. You touched on one of the questions that came up right near the end, and somebody that was concerned that and wondering if the increased prevalence of humane levels is perhaps encouraging, and that the industry actors know that people care, and they need to be diverted from the truth that's out there. And like you said, you felt it was something that we go through, that it gives people a way to feel that they are not hurting animals. But unfortunately, as you indicated, that is not the case. We'll have a couple of questions here, so I'll head straight into those. And one of the questions is, and excuse me, I have it on my other screen, so my eyes are going to go elsewhere for a second. Are there any legislative actions happening anywhere that are addressing the inaccurate advertising? Any independent oversight being put in place? And I will add my comment, because I had that question as well. There's a difference between marketing that is encouraging and then marketing that's an out and out lie, or shall I say fraud. Is there any independent oversight? What is happening here to actually address the fact that these are, in many cases, not accurately displaying something, or in the case of something like grass-fed, may encompass 5% of what that particular animal is receiving as nutrition?
Yeah. So there's two kind of areas. There's like governmental legislation and passing laws that are, protective consumer laws, right? And then there's the other side, which, and I'll say on that side, there are a lot of consumer laws. There's a lot of consumer protection laws that they are out and out violating, that you cannot lie to the public, but they're violating those laws, and they do that. There is a whole area of activism that is kind of in the lawyers section, like with Animal Legal Defense Fund, and another one that's out there is Legal Impact for Chickens. It's a new group that are lawyers that are bringing lawsuits against companies that are false advertising in some way, and it's state by state, and there's some federal laws, but the state laws are easier, I think, to get a win with. And there's state by state, there's different laws that, you cannot lie to the public But they're easily circumvented and manipulated or whatever. But what this, and I think it is as long as these lawsuits, I think, have a really good public facing campaign connected to them, then I think they can do some good. But oftentimes, like, they'll go through years, literally years of lawsuits with some company. And all that changes is that, okay, so I'll give an example. There's a company called Judy's Eggs in Sonoma County. And they were, the number one supposedly best eggs to buy at the natural food store. Even though you go to I went out to their farms, and birds were totally in windowless warehouses, never saw the light of day, featherless, looked awful, in terrible conditions. But then on their packaging, they had pictures of chickens out on a field with the hills in the background, Sonoma Hills, and they had on their website, our chickens, are out in the fields of Sonoma. They're out in the wonderful fields of Sonoma, whatever. So Animal Legal Defense Fund brought a lawsuit against Judy's Eggs. That lawsuit went on for, whatever. They probably spent millions of dollars, went on for a couple years. Paying all these lawyers. All that changed was that they changed the label to not have the picture of the little chickens anymore, and they put two little children in a field or sitting out in a field. That's all that changed. And now they're legally, now it's all legal, And so I don't know. I just don't know that these kinds of avenue activism avenues are beneficial, because they've got then Judy's Eggs had a team of lawyers. How can we, have the minimum impact or get out of this the easiest? Same thing happened with Ben and Jerry's. Ben and Jerry's was sued for their statements on their website about their cows in good conditions. And all they had to do was change the wording a little bit. And did anyone know? Did anyone ever hear that? No. So I don't know that is the best avenue of activism. I think there has to be a really strong public facing thing saying, we're doing this, and look, Judy's Eggs is a problem. Unless they have that component, it's all behind doors, and the companies just get out of it with their team of lawyers that they're spending millions of dollars on. So anyway, sorry, that's kind of a long answer, but it's,
Yeah, no, it was a good answer, and it's a lot, and it's some insight into how little you may need to do in order to get away from a lawsuit situation and to address some of those concerns. So have you ever had any constructive debates on any mainstream media on this topic?
I think mainstream media cares about this or me or my book. No, I've tried. I mean, we did press releases. When the book came out, I did get into Psychology Today with a blog and interview style blog. But that was just because Mark Beckoff, who is a wonderful animal writer, and I know him from, years past and some other projects. So Mark was kind enough he works for Psychology, or he has a blog with Psychology Today online, their online magazine. And I was able to get an interview with him for that, so it's very hard to get into mainstream, avenues. And unfortunately, my little nonprofit Compassionate Living, no, I don't have any mainstream outlets, unfortunately.
Well, that's a shame. And nobody, like, from a mainstream type blog or a mainstream news station has ever wanted to talk to you about that.
No, the closest is like, Jane Unchained. I've been on Jane Unchained. I mean, I consider her mainstream media, but probably not. That's mainstream for animal activists. Okay.
Yeah. Now we have someone that's brought up a new something that's catching on here. So we know that in organic farm, there are entrants from animal exploitation and slaughter that are used. I mean, you can actually use chicken manure and things like that. You can use chicken fertilizer, which may have ground up chicks in it, etc. And it deals more with how animals are fed, not so much how they're treated. But we're hearing a lot more now about veganic agriculture, veganic farming, and gardening. And I'm just interested in what you've heard about that and what you think about that in relation to organic.
Yeah, I've actually got a podcast on it,
Okay.
podcast episode fairly recently. It was within the last year, and I can't remember the name of the farmer it was a woman that I interviewed. She's a veganic farmer. And I can't remember her name. But anyway, I interviewed a veganic farmer. And yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, I hate going to the store and even buying organic. You know, you try not to think about it, but there's all those animal inputs. There can be blood meal and bone meal and feather meal and all that disgusting stuff, that they're putting in there. So especially with organic, actually, if they're not using the chemicals and they lean more towards those things. So, it's definitely a problem. So, finding veganic in your area, yeah, if you can, I mean, it's hard to find, but finding veganic in your area, there are some areas now that are doing veganic CSA boxes, like a box, you can pick up a box, of produce. If you have that in your area, you're very lucky. I haven't been able to find that here. But we want it more and more. So supporting those farmers, even through social media and like just getting it more out there, getting people to know about it more is going to help it to spread and be more known, so yeah, veganic agriculture all the way.
We actually have a veganic CSA box farm in within an hour's drive of me, but
Really?
they sell out so fast. I wasn't able to get on their list this time, but I'm going to be way faster next year, I tell you.
Wow.
So we just need a few more of those, and yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to see that come forward. One more question that I have here is the idea of lab-grown meat as an alternative seems dubious to some people. What are your thoughts on whether this is an alternative?
I don't like talking about this. Sorry, I really don't. It's, I feel like it's such a it's like this is how I feel about it. Okay. I feel like it's this one little tiny tool down here in the corner that we've blown up and everybody's so worried about it. I understand. I don't, I don't know where I fall. I'm not taking a side on this. Some people are very excited about it. The alternative protein folks that are into Impossible and all of that. And they're very excited about the lab grown meat as well. And then there's another more grassroots, I think I would say, side of people that are concerned that, this doesn't really get us out of animal farming, not necessarily out of animal use, right? You still have to commodify an animal at some point and use it's really not getting us out. It's not a path. This is what I would say is maybe they think, I'm trying to paraphrase for them, but it's not a path towards animal freedom or animal liberation. It's just, anyway, so I may not have been represented that side well, but I think you might get the picture. So, it's difficult to say. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this, and I don't know that I really have much of an opinion. I think that, it's something that's going to probably happen if it can. Some people don't think that it can. I'll say this. I interviewed a guy, what was his name? Kathark was his last name. It was an Indian name, and I can't remember. Shikar. Anyway, I can't remember the name of these people that I interview on the podcast, but he was talking about fermented meat, fermentation meat, and how that should be more explored and a better path to go scientifically, that it doesn't have all the problems of lab grown meat, and it could very easily, the fermentation, and I think there are some fermentation dairies out where I don't know enough about it. I'm not a scientist. This isn't my area of expertise. I'm sorry. I'm kind of bumbling through this one. So you know what? I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other. I know that others do. So I will just leave it at that. I'm sorry. That maybe was an unsatisfying answer.
Oh no, that's quite all right. I think a lot of people are quite unsure about the topic.
Yeah.
We're coming to the end of our hour, so I just have one more question for you, and that has to do with regenerative agriculture. Now, you just touched
This
lightly
I can
on
talk
it,
about.
but it's such a big topic that people are jumping on, especially those people that do enjoy eating meat. Is that not only is this a good way for us to raise the animals, but we're also making the soil better, and we're doing all these natural aspects that will help the environment, help our soil nutrition, help the animals.
Right.
You didn't touch on it too much, but can you just give us maybe a little bit of
Sure.
a taste for where you think these kinds of beliefs are when it comes to
Yes.
regenerative agriculture?
Yes, absolutely. So this is a big topic, so I'll try to not get too involved. But with regenerative grazing, you've really got to think about, you've got to separate regenerative plant farming and regenerative animal farming. Okay. So, because oftentimes when they talk about it and when you hear about it, they're just lumping all this together. Okay. But when you separate it, regenerative plant farming is really a good thing. There's a lot of good aspects to it. There's a lot of good things happening there. And we should be supporting regenerative plant farming. However, over here, regenerative animal farming is a completely different thing. And with regenerative animal farming, there's usually we're talking about grazing, regenerative grazing of ruminants, either, cows or sheep or something like that, goats, and what they're talking about really, I mean, they've been doing these kinds of experimentative small farming for a long time, but really they're talking about like rotational grazing. Okay, so where you take a large area of land and you break it up into smaller pastures, and you've got a small number of animals on a large area of land, and that's a problem right there. You're not feeding many people. You're having to use a huge area of land to clear all that, whatever it was, wetlands or trees or whatever it was. You're clearing all that, and then you've got these small paddocks, and you rotate the animals paddock to paddock so that you're not just really upsetting one area too detrimentally, and it has time to regenerate, right? So that's what kind of regenerative or rotational grazing is. There's a lot of problems with this, okay, just a lot, and I don't have the time to get into all of them. One is that, like I said, you've got small number of animals for a huge area of land, so you're not feeding many people. You're having to allocate this land for grazing alone, when the better, and see, this is the thing that really you get into is when you start comparing, right? So they'll do this like comparison of conventional farming or regenerative, and maybe you will get some better numbers, not always, but maybe you will get some better numbers. But if you compare regenerative grazing to just rewilding that space, regrowing the trees, regrowing the green areas, and then just farming plants on a much small, if you're farming the plants, you only need one little quarter of that, several 10 acres or whatever, right? Then you could rewild all that space. And that is where you get a carbon sink. That's where you get such wonderful numbers of regeneration, right? So rewilding is what we need to be doing with the land, not opening more space for more grazing. I mean, we know the problem with land use in the US is grazing, right? That's what's gotten us to the point where we are. That's what's gotten us to the point where we have a huge percentage, I don't have the numbers, but a huge percentage of our land is for livestock grazing. I don't like using that term, but cows out grazing. That's what has been detrimental to species extinction and species being listed as federally listed as anyway, wildlife all kinds of issues, right? That's what's gotten us to where we are. And what are they proposing as the solution? More grazing. No, it makes no sense. So there's a lot to this. It's big, but I really, if you want to dig into these chapters and also my podcasts, have a lot more wonderful information about it. But that's kind of it in a nutshell, is we really need to be comparing not to other forms of animal agriculture. Don't compare one form of animal agriculture to another. Compare animal agriculture to plant farming and rewilding. That's where the emissions come way down. That's where the numbers come way down. That's where water pollution, all of that gets better. So
Yeah, it's not just the methane they produce, it's also the carbon sink we've lost.
yes.
Yes.
Well put. Thank you, Carrie. Well put.
Well, thank you. Hope we've just gone a little bit over time, so I hope that our listeners were able to, and our viewers were able to participate for 5 more minutes. Hope, thank you so much for your time and all the information that you've given. It has been a real thrill to have you on our speaker series.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.